I love horror movies, and this is related, but I have to mention this because it's the only way I can contextualize what we're going to be discussing in the video. I love horror movies so much that I'm making my own, in fact, and you probably have heard of this if you have been watching the channel in the last few months. But even if you haven't, stay tuned, because the trailer for that film is coming soon. So get excited, get your wallets ready, tell your friends. So, I say that to say this. I am not just very familiar with terrifying things, I generally enjoy them. But the subject of this video made me crawl into my bed shivering. It came from a YouTube comment. You know how it's like, oh, it came from outer space. Yeah, well, this came from a YouTube comment, the horror of the 21st century. And the premise is, of course, what if U-Turn was in Gen 3 OU? And let me tell you, that is some messed up stuff. So I should also mention that I do read the comments for good video ideas. So if you have a video idea that you want me to make, then you can leave it in a comment or in the Discord server, the link to which is in the description. And while I'm mentioning things linked in the description, then I also have a Patreon if you like me so much you want to give me a couple bucks a month. If you feel like using me as your sleep aid merits that. I know, we have a very special connection, you and I. Me lulling you to sleep with facts about movies and Pokemon. Did you know that the Czech New Wave, well, Czechoslovak New Wave, first of all. But anyway, let's actually get to the main thing. So, U-Turn Gen 3. U-Turn came around in Gen 4, and instantly people were like, wow, this move is actually incredible. Because at first you're like, oh yeah, switch move, big deal. We had Baton Pass, 70 base power, bug, what's the big deal? And then people realize, oh, this is a really big deal. Because hitting Psychic and Dark types super effectively, and Grass types, some Grass types anyway, super effectively is really, really valuable. And just in general, it's good chip damage. And we even had a bug type that wound up being really amazing, Scizor. Not just for U-Turn, because some of Scizor's sets don't even run it, but it needed Bullet Punch, which I got in Platinum first. But yeah, that strongest U-Turn in the game, that's no joke. Anyway, then the obvious question is, like Stealth Rock, God, Stealth Rock and U-Turn in Gen 3, what if you just wanted to explode your entire conception of it? One of the scariest things about certain types of horror movies, like cosmic horror movies, is that the most terrifying thing is the sheer inability to comprehend what you're dealing with. And, again, related, because U-Turn is such a fundamental change to Gen 3, I'm starting to, venture into that territory. It's so completely upends the game. I really think it might get banned. It might be a little too good. So before we throw on some replays, let's examine every Pokemon in Gen 3 that could, every notable Pokemon. We might leave Butterfree out of this one, sadly. I still love Butterfree, though. Bye-bye, Butterfree. What an episode. We're going to list all the notable Pokemon that would learn U-Turn. So we're not just going to give it to Aerodactyl. If you really want to get U-Turn banned, you pretend like it was supposed to have U-Turn and then give it to Aero. Or you pretend like Aero was supposed to have U-Turn and then just ruin the game. It's like, alright, let's ban the move. So, Celebi would have it. Yeah, as if Celebi needs any help getting better. Celebi's not even going to be the worst offender, not by far. Flygon? Yikes. Because Flygon's a physical attacker. Like the other U-Turn users in OU, at least they're mostly like special attackers. But a physically attacking Flygon with... Because Flygon already likes running HP Bug. And now it's got U-Turn. Then we've got... Oh, Jirachi having U-Turn? When I was going through it in my head, I was like, okay, Celebi, Zapdos, then Flygon. And I totally blanked on Jirachi getting U-Turn. Jirachi, of all the Pokemon on this list that get U-Turn, I think Jirachi is the most obnoxious and restrictive in Gen 3 in general, so giving this one of the most obnoxious and restrictive moves in the game, I don't like that. That would be really irritating. Then we've, of course, got Zapdos, and that would be absolutely nightmarish. We'll get to why this would be nightmarish, of course. I just want to go through what else I'm missing. I don't think Crobat really improves that much by getting U-turn, or Dodrio. I mean, Dodrio maybe. I mean, Dodrio is kind of niche, but it's got really high attack, and it's pretty fast. I mean, it's frail as anything else, but, good stabs. Maybe, you give it some more gimmicky use. Then we've got Scizor. Yep. I think Scizor would become viable. I do. Because it would have a lot. I mean, it's not going to be great, but you could definitely run a good choice band set with it. And, matter of fact, you would run a very good choice band set with it. And then Smeargle, I don't think. Well, Smeargle could use it, actually. Actually, Smeargle would love using it. What am I talking about? Because a lot of the problems with Smeargle... Well, we'll get to it one by one when we go through everything. I just want to list the users first and then come back to them. I don't think Swellow would really be that much better, because Swellow's thing is like baton passing Starfberry, which is very fun, but... Yeah, and I don't think anything in UU would really have its viability too fundamentally altered. Gligar, maybe. Gligar's already kind of decent, even without Sandvale, just because its typing is so good. I mean, its move pool is not as good as its, its stats can be a little lacking, but maybe with U-turn. I think its move pool is still a little dry, because most of what it wants to do is be Swords Dancing, so you don't want to really U-turn with it, but, maybe. But I don't think it's really going to affect much. Jumpluff, maybe, for sure. Jumpluff definitely has the, this whole Sleep, Leech. I mean, you don't want to be switching Jumpluff in and out a lot, but it causes a lot of switches with Sleep and Leech. Maybe you could take advantage of that. But yeah, the UU pokes I don't really see changing. Banded Ninjask. Hey, maybe... Wow, that's actually... I don't think it's going to be as good as Scizor because it's not nearly as strong. But definitely something that fast having a stab banded U-turn. And then we've got Scyther even. Maybe Scyther's like the better version of Ninjask. Well, I mean, Ninjask is so fast that it outspeeds like D-Deers even at +1. Or even like T-Char at +2, I'm pretty sure. But Scyther might be better because it's got great speed for advance. It's got the same typing, which means Spike's immune. And Earthquake, of course. Over Scizor. And it's still quite powerful, so... Yeah, maybe Scyther... Well, the funniest thing about Scyther getting U-turn in advance would, of course, be that it would instantly get a ban from UU. So, yeah, and then, like, Xatu, and I don't think there's anything else, really. And NU, I don't really think so, either. Yeah, so just to be 100% sure, but... Yeah, no. Yanma, hey. Anyway, okay. So, the reason U-turn is such an insane move in later generations is fairly obvious, right? To the point where people have wanted it banned, and that's in generations with Stealth Rock. And then, of course, it gets compounded by other switch moves and heavy-duty boots, and more users, of course. But just the move is fundamentally so nasty because it's very win-win. If you have U-turn in against... It's generally the case with moves that get better over the generations, like Scald or... let's say... What's the other thing? Draco Meteor, for example, pre-Fairy. These moves that no matter what you do, the opponent is going to struggle to deal with them. Contrasted to the balance of the first three generations relatively, where you did have really great moves, really strong moves, but it was very difficult to spam them freely and just have success with them. The closest you would get is Spikes. And, of course, that is insanely powerful, but is not, anywhere near the same immediate destructive impact of these other things. So, with U-turn, like these other moves, like these Scalds and Draco Meteors and, switch move clones, close combats, things like that. Not to say that, these moves don't have their very good counterplay, but and not even to say that U-turn can potentially backfire. I mean, of course it can, but so can Baton Pass, and that is banned in nearly every generation. So, a little common sense. Just I realize I'm getting a little preemptive with this, but I've been around Pokemon discussions on the internet long enough to know that people love nitpicking little details that you would assume are common sense. So I have to get that out there first. Anyway. So yeah, U-turn is a very win-win move because you get a U-turn user in against a Pokemon that it threatens out, or threatens out with U-turn in particular. And if they stay in, then they get hit hard by U-turn, and if they switch out, then you of course get switch advantage, and you chunk them while doing it. But U-turn is so much nastier. I mean, people already have an issue with Baton Pass Zapdos in advance, for example, because it's so difficult to answer since its checks generally aren't faster. Jolteon is a very rare exception. And that way, when you switch into a Pokemon like that with Baton Pass or U-turn, then you can't double switch on it. You can't regain momentum on it. When you've got... if you had Zapdos against Blissey, and you switched out to your T-Tar or whatever, the Blissey could double switch to Dugtrio or Skarmory or whatever. But if you try that with Blissey against Zapdos and it Baton Passes, then you're not going to get a good matchup anyway. Unless their team is so weak to Skarmory or whatever. But again, please, common sense. But generally, it's like you're not going to get that ideal matchup you're looking for because they see, as they BP or U-turn, oh, well... they switched, so now I'm just going to switch to something else that I want to bring into this thing, as opposed to the the complete mismatch that I would have had if I was forced to blind switch without the help of a switch move. So it generally makes these kinds of things very easy for the switch move using Pokemon. Even if you have a situation like, and obviously this one backfires a lot more. But even if you have a situation like, let's say, Zapdos versus Skarmory, and you BP, and because you think it's going to switch, but even if you see that it stays in, then you move accordingly. It's not like if you had to switch and expecting them to switch, and then they just stay in instead, and they Toxic or Whirlwind or U-turn. Well, as you use the switch move, you are aware of that possibility. So now you don't go to your Toxic vulnerable Pokemon if you think they're going for Toxic, for example. So it generally lets you play very cautiously, very safely. And by and large, it is very riskless. So, and of course, U-turn is way more efficient than Baton Pass generally because of the little chip damage. And you would think, okay, well, let's not exaggerate. 70 base power unstab physical move on Zapdos is not exactly destroying things. First of all, remember, Advance has permanent sand in addition to spikes. So Zapdos T-bolts Blissey and then U-turns on it, and suddenly it's lost 25%. That's as much as 3 layers of spikes. And so Blissey can't just hang around forever. It's going to have to heal. And those little bits of damage, then those rack up very quickly. And now you add spikes into the picture. And let's also not underestimate the super effective coverage. Like, yes, it's little damage, but you hit Celebi quadruple super effective. That's going to be significant damage. Even on defensive Celebi, it's going to be a lot more than you're generally going to muster. And the whole point is you're not doing this for enormous damage. You're doing it for damage while you get to switch out. So you're doing way more than you should on such a turn, which is the whole idea. And that is really, really restrictive, or makes playing against these Pokemon really restrictive. It makes these amazing Pokemon even better than they already are. Limits their counterplay options even further. So, Zapdos in particular is an egregious offender because of how nasty it is with BP, and U-turn just makes it... Like, even Claydol. Claydol's not going to be taking much damage from a Zapdos U-turn, but it's still going to be taking more than 0, and... in a game like Pokemon, where every percent counts, then you need that more than 0 chance, or you need every little more than 0 piece of damage rather to wear down the opponent. Even if, like, let's say you're U-turning out of a defensive Jirachi, right? Let's just say it's bold max, the physically bulkiest Jirachi in existence. Even like a Metagross, right? Would you rather U-turn on it and, do a net, I don't know, or let's say you don't even outdamage leftovers. Let's say you do 3%. Okay, would you rather that Jirachi heals 3% with leftovers that turn or 6%? And if you say, oh, it's not that big a difference, then you don't play Pokemon. Because when dealing with something as obnoxious as Jirachi, you need every 3%. This is especially if it's like one turn, obviously, over the course of the game, yes, it might not be that big a deal. But then again, it might not. And also, the point is that these Pokemon are getting multiple chances to U-turn. It's not just going to be a one-and-done type deal. So, yeah, Zapdos in particular, I don't know if you ban Zapdos or if you ban U-turn. And I know I'm generally a quick to jump to the ban hammer kind of guy, but I really think U-turn in a generation without Stealth Rock is just way, way too much. I mean, U-turn hits T-Tar super effectively. And you might say, oh, it's good to knock down, the best Pokemon a peg. But I don't know. I just think Advance... I'm not opposed to adding moves from later generations to earlier generations for balance purposes, for example. Like, if Gen 3 suddenly had, I don't know, Spiky Shield, let's say. I think that's a good move. That's fine. I mean... It would maybe not ideal. Maybe it makes defense... What would even get it? I guess Cacturne, which is banned because of Sandville anyway, so not a great example. But let's just say that some Pokemon got Spiky Shield. I would say, well, it sucks that offense moves are even more punished, but that's not going to break the game or anything. So not a big deal. No one's going to call for a ban on that. And if you add one better offensive move, then... I don't know, close combat would probably be too much. But, I don't know, something to make offense a little bit better, then that would be a positive change, I think. Even if you like the balance of Advance as it is right now. But, something like this, which is so powerful, I think just... Even if it doesn't completely destroy the game, and I think a lot of people get this confused, like, oh, well, the game isn't literally unplayable with this element in it, so why should we act on it? Well, because you want to make the game better, obviously. You want to limit the amount of insanely restrictive stuff that makes it difficult to face off against, because the options against it are so few and so unreliable. You can take the most horrible metagames of all time. My go-to is always, I'm gonna be my own stereotype right now. Early Black and White 2, when Genesect and Tornadus Therian were running around, that was the most unplayable metagame ever. And people still played it in tournaments, and good players won. That's generally how the game works. I'm pretty sure that was the case when Mega Rayquaza was in Ubers. So, when I say that U-turn would need to be banned, I don't mean that it just completely makes Advance into this, nightmare... I don't even know what you would call it. This horrible... Yeah, whatever you would refer to it as. I was thinking the word purgatory, but I was like, that's not quite right. Unless it means you can never escape it, I guess. But, yeah, unless you think of it as... It just completely upends the game of Pokemon. As... being unplayable. What does that even mean? But I still think it would need to be banned. I think it's too good for what it is, because it limits everything way too much. Sorry, I got distracted by the replay. And it's about to end, so then we will go to the team builder and examine the Pokemon by Pokemon cases. So, okay. Celebi, the first option. Now, it's going to be tough to pin down a moveset on this because, again, it changes the game so fundamentally, it's difficult to really think of from what our conception of Advance is right now. But Celebi would, of course, be amazing with it. I mean, Leech Seed plus U-turn. Here's how nasty it would be. The most common Pokemon you will see... Actually, pretty much the only Pokemon you will see switching into Celebi that is immune to Leech Seed is other Celebi, right? Because, yes, once in a while you will see Breloom, but Breloom does not switch into Celebi. It's the other way around. So, Celebi is the only Leech Seed immune in the game, and Celebi switches into itself a lot. And Celebi also will have U-turn to hit other Celebi quadruple super effectively. That is an unpleasant proposition. I mean, it's not like Leech Seed just completely rips the game apart either, but it definitely makes things a lot nastier. Because a U-turn is not just going to be limited to making Celebi even more efficient at leech seeding, of course. Celebi already works incredibly well with Magneton and Dugtrio, and with Baton Pass instead, because it gets some free switches. And with U-turn, then it's the same basic idea, except you're also chipping the opponent. You know? Here's a perfect example of just how brutal U-turn can be. Remember, permanent sand is a really big deal. And this is especially, like earlier I mentioned the example of limiting how much Jirachi or Metagross would heal from leftovers, right? Well, first of all, let's just think about the Metagross sets that don't have leftovers, and think about how much you like having a free 4% of damage on them, for example. As opposed to BPing out and doing nothing. That's already one example. But let's think about the Pokemon that don't heal in sand, or are affected by sand. So if they run leftovers, well, if they're not running leftovers, then you wear them down even more quickly. Like if you BP out of a Choice Band Salamence switching in, then it's only taking 6% from sand. But if you U-turn, it's taking more like 10. Or let's say 8, whatever. You get the idea. I'm going to just assume that the U-turn is doing like 2% max. So it's taking 8, and that adds up. So that kind of thing. But even if it does have lefties, like a lot of Pokemon, like especially Gengar. Gengar is the poster Pokemon for this. If you have a bulky Gengar, you need it at full health. Bulky Gengar can take a lot of hits in OU, but it can generally only take them once, and it can only do it from very close to full health. And as soon as you tap it with that 2% quadruple resisted U-turn and sand, you are messing up its whole life. Right? Because you could make these risky pivots with Pokemon that really need to stay at full health. You could switch Gengar into an expected BP, or you could switch Lefty Salamence to an expected BP, but not nearly as much into U-turn. And this is just, this would even mess up like something like Charizard, which likes to substitute from full health. It switches into a quadruple resisted U-turn, and suddenly its whole ability to switch into 2 Meteor Mashes from Metagross, for example, is compromised. You can switch Charizard into Celebi BP, you can still answer 2 Metagross Mashes later, but you hang on with just enough percent. But you start switching it into U-turns, and that starts getting messed up. So, Celebi U-turning is not just going to be on Leech Seed set. I think it would probably be on Leech Seed sets, just because, it's also nice to be able to run, to not get completely ruined by Taunt, for example. Like Leech Seed, Recover, BP. Usually Sub is the last move, and you wouldn't run Sub U-turn, but you could run something else, like Leech Seed, Recover, U-turn, and, I don't know, Heal Bell, for example. Actually, that sounds like a great set. With Magneton support, and you U-turn to get in Mag. And suddenly, you're facing down a Taunt Gengar, and Taunt Gengar would prevent you from, because you want to, if you slow BP out of Gengar, you prevent your switch-in from taking damage, right? And if you hard switch out, then your switch-in takes damage. But if you get taunted on the BP, then you are going to be forced to struggle, and you're taking damage either way. So it's going to be really nasty. With U-turn, you have the teleport Slowking thing, where you take the damage for your opponent. It's risk-free. Actually, even better than teleport, because teleport you can at least taunt. I also got another horrifying video suggestion. What if teleport worked like it did in Gen 8 and every other generation? But that's for another time. Yeah, so U-turn Celebi, generally going to be on Leech sets. I'm sure you could run more offensive versions of it too. Fast U-turn is always a good thing. I wonder if you could run like SD U-turn and just completely destroy stuff. The one downside U-turn has over Baton Pass is that U-turn is affected by Pursuit. But remember, this is also, as if it couldn't be any better for U-turn, this is also a generation where Tyranitar Pursuit, or Pursuit in general, but Tyranitar using Pursuit is doing so off its special attack stat. It's not boosted by Choice Band. It's not coming off. It's one of the highest attack sets in the game. It's a lot more manageable to deal with. So even like pursuing Celebi is not necessarily going to be its end. And you're still hitting T-Tar pretty decently. So yeah, so Celebi U-turning nightmarish in all sorts of scenarios. If anyone has ideas for sets to run on that, let me know in the comments down below. Yeah, Flygon. This one's pretty easy. You just run EQ, Rock Slide, U-turn, filler. Depending on that, you can run Fire Blast if your team is focused on beating down Skarmory. You can run HP Bug if you want to hit Celebi. Like if you don't want to be forced to switch out of Celebi, you can absolutely run HP Bug. The whole point about CB Flygon or offensive lefties Flygon is that it really only needs with Magneton support, because generally you want Magneton to deal with Skarmory rather than trying to Fire Blast it down. Or Hariyama feasibly, but generally, let's just say Magneton. You prefer that to more directly deal with the Skarm problem rather than compromise yourself. And Fortress to a lesser extent. But yeah, generally, once Skarm is out of the picture, then you only really need EQ, Rock Slide, HP Bug, so you can fit, Sub, Toxic, Screech feasibly if you want, whatever you want. So you could feasibly do the same thing with, you could run EQ, Rock Slide, HP Bug, U-turn, or if you don't feel like being forced to switch out of Celebi when you U-turn it, because Bold Celebi can recover off U-turns. Only Bold though. But players who have used Scarf Flygon in Generation 4 and have played long enough to remember when Bold Celebi was common will remember that like an Adamant Max Attack Flygon U-turn to a Bold Celebi like tops out at 50. So you can recover it off, but again, that's only Bold Celebi. It's still not a pleasant hit. So generally you could say, nah, skip the HP Bug, use U-turn instead. Especially because that lets you use a different HP. It lets you run HP Ghost for Gengar, for example. Yeah, that's opening up that coverage. That's really pleasant. Yeah, and I mean, Flygon U-turning hit you because Claydol is a really big deal in Advanced now, and I have to make that video. Don't worry, that one's on my list. I'm not going to forget that one. But being able to chunk Claydol, because Claydol's whole thing is that it's not worn down by sand and spikes, so it gets lefties really easily, and it makes it really tough to block its spin long term. And when you U-turn on it with these things, then you really cut into that hard, because you're hitting it super effectively. You're not just neutering its leftovers for a turn. And especially when you're hitting it so hard with an offensive Flygon. Choice Band, Choice Band U-turn in advance. Celebi doesn't want to recover on that, even if it's bold. You could run CB Gun, but even just offensive lefties, it's going to hit hard. And even defensive Flygon, that's an amazing move. So often, defensive Flygon kind of can mess around with its moveset a little. EQ, Protect, and then, 2 of Toxic, Rock Slide, Flamethrower, whatever you want, Rest. That one's a little extreme, but yeah, and if you throw U-turn on there, that's amazing. That helps your coverage and just lets you get momentum. Let's say you've got Flygon against T-Tar. T-Tar is scared out. It's like, oh, I want to double switch, but I'm scared of T-Tar staying in. Well, now you U-turn out of T-Tar. If it stays in, then you chunk it for damage, i.e. what Flygon is supposed to do. And if it pursues you, then you can heal that damage off easily. And it's not really going to be threatening you much beyond that. And if it switches out, switch advantage and chip damage while you're doing it. There's no rough skin in this generation. Technically, yeah, Sharpedo has rough skin, but Sharpedo also dies to U-turn. So I'm sure you're willing to... If your opponent shows up with rough skin Sharpedo to punish your U-turn, you thank them for the free KO. There's no Rocky Helmet. There's no Iron Barbs. You are not punishing... There's no Spiky Shield. There's no that other thing that I'm forgetting. Yeah, whatever it is. I don't know if there's something else. Oh, I guess there's like Flame Body and Static, but nothing really runs those things. We'll look at the Flame Body and Static pokes just to see. But yeah, that would be really nasty. Oh, and here's another horrible thing about Flygon. Or amazing, horrible, horrifying. Celebi, at least, when it U-turns, or baton passes, it compounds its weaknesses to sand and spikes. Right? Celebi does not passively heal against these two major restricting factors of longevity and advance. Flygon is immune to both. So Flygon U-turns forever. You could have sand going, you could have 3 layers of spikes on the field. Flygon does not care. So that is nightmarish. Alright, Jirachi. This is so unpleasant on like a deeply visceral level. It's like a physical discomfort in my body, imagining, much like the great horror movies instill in you. Yeah, Jirachi with U-turn. I mean, there's so many things. There's so many ways this thing could do it. I mean, Wish U-turn is a classic combo. So rather than trying to think of defining U-turn Jirachi sets, because it could do so much. I mean, Jirachi is so good. You could run Calm Mind U-turn on this thing. Early game, you just throw out your special moves, then you U-turn on the T-Tar and the Blissey. Oh my God, U-turn. So yeah, before we get into that, I more want to go over how Jirachi would use U-turn rather than try to figure out the endless possibilities for sets it would run. Kind of like with Celebi. So yeah, the thing I was just about to say is that Jirachi uses U-turn. One, defensive sets can use it to escape Magneton, which is amazing. And it's related to number 2, which is that Jirachi already has a great partnership with Dugtrio, and now U-turn Rachi gets Dugtrio in freely, safely. Switch your Jirachi or your T-Tar into Blissey into this, and here's Doug. Try to trap a Jirachi with Mag one-on-one, and which is already a tough task, but U-turn into Doug. Yeah, horrifying stuff. U-turn out of Celebi. Oh, it recovered off the U-turn. There's Doug. Jirachi on Jirachi. Never mind, Doug. You could do slow U-turns, fast U-turns. Uninvested, invested, whatever. Yeah, I think Jirachi might actually be all of these Pokemon would be a factor in getting U-turn banned. Or at least, because I know when Gen 3 was the current generation, then banning moves was pretty much heresy. But even then, a lot of players played with restrictions on Baton Pass. And U-turn is, I think, even better than Baton Pass. So, yeah. Jirachi would just... Yeah, I mean, it's not even just the Escape Mag, the Facilitate Trappers things. It's just more of the same. More of the free chip for scouting the Switch. Yes, it costs a move slot, but Jirachi can run pretty much anything it wants anyway. Jirachi could run 3 moves and still be one of the best Pokemon in the tier. So, yeah. Insane. Do not want to think about it too much. Oh, yeah, I skipped over. Earlier, Moltres would have U-turn. Wow. Well, Moltres and Zapdos would be very similar, but Moltres U-turning out of T-Tar and Blissey, because Moltres actually has a good attack set. Moltres has 100 attack. That's the same as Flygon. It's stronger than Zapdos U-turn. So, you do these little things. You Will-O-Wisp the Refresh Milotic, then you U-turn on it. Oh, it's got to recover really quickly. You hit Starmie super effectively with U-turn Moltres. Starmie is usually one of the few things that's actually kind of decent against Moltres that's not named Blissey. Of course, the Blissey T-Tar thing, we understand that by now. That's just ridiculous. U-turn, people tend to prefer Charizard these days, but yeah, U-turn puts Moltres right back up there with it. Another video I have to make. Zard's Rise in advance. Or why beat up is good. You can make a funny joke about beating people up, which is a bad thing, of course, unless it's Pokemon. And yeah, then U-turn Moltres, too much. Yeah, even little things like Snorlax. Like, yeah, Snorlax is already a bad counter to these things, but it's already the sand spikes, and you would think, oh, is it broken without sand and spikes? Well, I guess U-turn isn't broken in and of itself. If you just take away all the broken things it enables, like sand, spikes, trapping. So I guess in that sense, yeah. Yeah, okay. So, and then finally Zapdos. I mean, we already went over this. Zapdos, forget checking this thing with Celebi ever. Blissey and T-Tar, nightmarish. Pretty much anything. Whether it's the Pokemon switching in being slower. Oh, yeah, Claydol even, because Claydol tends to pivot into Zapdos a lot. Yeah, well, forget that. Zapdos BPing out of Claydol, who cares? You turning out of Claydol, you're playing into Zapdos' hands. There's pretty much no way to not play into Zapdos' hands, or wings, I guess, with when it's running U-turn. It's every set is going to be Thunderbolt, Hidden Power, U-turn. And actually, you would just run HP Grass every time because you can just U-turn. Well, you're still not hitting Flygon. Excuse me, I guess, but yeah. Yeah, that's... I think that one kind of speaks for itself. It's just disgustingly good. Yeah, and the other ones I only want to mention CB Scizor because its U-turn would hit really hard, and obviously that quadruple fire weakness, and it's slow and vulnerable to spikes and not that bulky, but I think you would definitely have some interesting uses for it. The more I think about it, the more I'm like, all right, this would be not as good as I thought. I don't think it would become genuinely OU, for example. I think it'd still be a BL poke. But, hey, that U-turn, the only thing that really wants to switch into that U-turn is Skarmory, and of course there's Magneton, and Moltres and Charizard quad resisted as well, but that's when you start throwing in things like HP Rock, and then it can start getting scary, so I don't think it has enough opportunities to switch in to really make, good on its threat level as much as you'd want, but it's an interesting idea. Yeah, and then you say, all right, well, what about punishing these U-turns with Flame Body and Static? Well, Flame Body and Static would already be used if they existed now, or if they were on good Pokemon now, I should say, because there are other physical moves, like Meteor Mash and Double Edge, that you would love to punish, or, like Jirachi Fire Punch. You would love to punish that. But I'm pretty sure people have talked about, like, Magcargo before for these purposes, because Static Electrode, I mean, come on. Yeah, Magcargo is funny because it's the other Flame Body user is just like Magmar. Yeah, and Magmar is not physically bulky at all. At least Magcargo has a million things wrong with it, of course. But all the Flatic, I try to say Flame Body and Static at the same time. Flame Body Static Pokemon, they are frail. At least Magcargo, for all its flaws, is really, really physically bulky, if I remember anyway. Its HP is terrible, but yeah, it's got resist too because of the rock typing, so it resists Double Edge, and it's neutral to Jirachi Fire Punch. So theoretically, you could, but you're still not going to switch U-turn. Plus, even if you Flame Body a U-turn Celebi, who cares? It has Natural Cure, so that's the only one of the U-turn Pokemon. I guess Jirachi a little, but yeah, then the Jirachi Calm Minds and Good Night, and the others, forget it. Scizor, I guess, yeah, I don't think you really need to thwart Scizor that badly. You'll just thwart that naturally. But you can't even Flame Body Moltres because it's a fire type. So, yeah, Flame, not really an option. And the static pokes, you saw, like Electabuzz, Raichu, they're frail, so. Yeah. All right, thank you for watching / listening. That video, I did not expect this video to go on so long. I hope you enjoyed, and I will see you in the next one.